The forest north of town had a reputation. People said strange lights flickered there at night. Hikers claimed they heard whispers between the trees. Lila didn't believe any of it. But tonight the pendant warmed against her skin. A sudden knock on the window made her jump. Her best friend Rowan grinned at her through the glass, his messy dark hair plastered to his forehead. Lila opened the window. "You know doors exist, right?" Rowan climbed inside like a cat burglar anyway. "You're 18 now," he said dramatically. "I assumed that meant rebellion. Breaking into my room is not rebellion. It's trespassing. Same thing." He tossed himself into her desk chair, spinning once before stopping. His eyes landed on the pendant, glowing faintly in her hand. "You're holding it again." Lila quickly slipped the necklace around her neck. "It's nothing." Rowan didn't look convinced. "That necklace started glowing 3 nights ago," he said. "You expect me not to notice? It's probably just metal reacting to body heat or something. Metal doesn't glow. Maybe special metal does." Rowan raised an eyebrow. Lila sighed and grabbed her jacket. "Let's go." His suspicion instantly turned into excitement. "Where?" "The forest." He blinked. "Hold on. The creepy whispering forest?" "The one you've been daring me to explore since we were 12, she reminded him. Rowan stood slowly. "I was joking." "Well, I'm not." She pushed past him and climbed out the window. Rowan groaned. "I can't believe I'm about to die because you're curious." "You're not going to die. That's exactly what someone says right before people die." Still complaining, he followed her. The forest began where Oakvale's last streetlight faded. Tall pines towered overhead, their branches knitting together to block most of the moonlight. The path was narrow and damp, littered with fallen needles. Lila had walked this trail dozens of times during the day. At night it felt different, alive. Rowan stayed close behind her. "I hate it here already," he whispered. "You say that every time we go camping. Camping has tents and snacks and not..." Whatever that sound was, they both froze. Something had moved deeper in the trees, not an animal. Something heavier. Lila's hand instinctively grabbed the pendant. It was glowing brighter now. A pulse of silver light spilled across the ground. Rowan noticed immediately. "Okay, that's new." The wind suddenly died. The forest went completely silent. Then the trees began to shift. Lila blinked. The path ahead was changing. Branches curled away from each other like doors opening. Roots pulled back into the soil. The forest itself was creating a new path. Rowan grabbed her arm. "Lila, I see it. Trees don't do that." "No," she whispered. "They don't." But the path was there now, and something beyond it shimmered with pale blue light. A strange pull tugged at her chest, like the forest was calling her. "Don't," Rowan said quietly. Lila hesitated. For a moment she thought about turning back, about returning home and pretending none of this had happened. Then the pendant burned warm against her skin. She took a step forward. The moment her foot crossed the new path, the world shifted. The air grew colder. The scent of pine vanished, replaced with something sharper, sweeter, unfamiliar. The trees ahead opened into a vast clearing, and beyond it stood a kingdom. Lila stopped breathing. Silver towers rose into the night sky like frozen lightning. Bridges of crystal arched over glowing rivers. Strange floating lights drifted through the air like lazy stars. It was beautiful. It was impossible, Rowan whispered behind her. "What is that?" Lila didn't answer. Her eyes had locked onto something else. At the far end of the clearing stood a dark figure, a man, tall, still, watching her. Moonlight caught in his hair, turning it pale gold, but shadows clung to the rest of him like living smoke. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze, ancient, cold, powerful. Rowan stepped backward. "Lila," he said quietly, "that guy looks like he could murder entire armies." The stranger began walking toward them. Every step made the shadows swirl around his boots. Lila's heart hammered. Some instinct deep inside her screamed danger. Yet she couldn't move. The man stopped only a few feet away. Up close, he was even more unsettling. His eyes were a stormy silver, sharp enough to cut glass, and when he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "So," he said slowly, "the human girl has finally arrived." Rowan blinked. Okay, he said nervously. That sentence alone tells me we should run. But the stranger's gaze remained fixed on Lila. Lila Maren, he continued. Her stomach dropped. How do you know my name? A faint smile touched his lips. It wasn't warm. If anything, it felt dangerous. I have been waiting for you, he said. For 18 years. Rowan leaned toward her. Please tell me you didn't accidentally join a cult. But Lila wasn't listening anymore, because the shadows around the stranger's body were moving, crawling like living things, and suddenly she understood something deep in her bones. This man wasn't just dangerous. He was cursed. The stranger straightened. I am Irrendor, he said, king of the Fae. The word Fae sent a chill down her spine. Rowan whispered, Nope, absolutely not. But Irrendor continued calmly. And you, he said, his gaze piercing hers, are the only human in this world who can break my curse. Lila stared at him. Then anger flared hot in her chest. Her parents had disappeared chasing stories about the Fae, stories that had ruined her life, and now the king of those creatures stood in front of her like she owed him something. She crossed her arms. Let me guess, she said sharply, you want my help. Eryndor studied her expression. Eventually. Lila laughed once. Cold. You're out of luck. His brow lifted slightly. Oh. She stepped closer, glaring straight into his storm-grey eyes. If you're a Fae king, she said, then you're probably the reason my parents are dead. The shadows around him stilled. Lila's voice hardened. So here's the truth. I don't care about your curse. I don't care about your kingdom. And I definitely don't care about you. She leaned forward just enough for him to hear every word clearly. I hate the Fae. Silence fell across the clearing. Rowan muttered behind her. This feels like a terrible survival strategy. But Eryndor didn't look angry. If anything, something darker flickered in his eyes. Interest. Good, the Fae King said quietly. Lila frowned. What? His smile sharpened. Hatred, he said, makes things far more interesting. Then his gaze dropped briefly to her glowing pendant, and the shadows around him stirred again. Because whether you hate me or not, he continued, you are still the only one who can save me. Lila's hand tightened around the necklace. Not happening. Eryndor stepped closer. The air seemed to bend around his power. Oh, he said softly, we will see. The clearing felt colder after Eryndor spoke. Lila stood her ground, but every instinct in her body screamed that she should run. The man in front of her, the Fae King apparently, looked less like a ruler and more like something pulled from a nightmare. Shadows coiled around his boots and crawled along the ground like living things, fading only a few inches from her feet. Rowan tugged on her sleeve. Okay, he whispered urgently. I think we've reached the point where we politely leave. Lila didn't move. Eryndor's gaze was still locked on her necklace. That pendant, he said quietly. Where did you get it? None of your business, Lila snapped. A faint smile curved his lips again. You truly do hate me. Congratulations. You're catching on. Behind her, Rowan leaned closer. I'm starting to hate him too, he whispered. But I'd like to hate him from very far away. Irrendor ignored him completely. His attention never left Lila. Your parents gave it to you, he said calmly. Her stomach twisted. How do you know that? The wind shifted suddenly, rustling through the strange silver grass of the clearing. Irrendor's expression darkened. Because, he said slowly, they once stood where you stand now. The words hit her like a punch. Rowan blinked. Wait, Lila's voice came out sharper than she intended. You're lying. I rarely lie, Irrendor replied, and I definitely don't believe Fae Kings. Something flickered in his storm-grey eyes. Not anger, something more complicated. You believe I caused their deaths, he said. That's not belief, Lila shot back. That's fact. For a moment, the air between them crackled with tension. Then Irrendor sighed softly. You humans are remarkable, he murmured. How? You always assume the simplest story is the truth. Lila clenched her fists. I know enough, and yet you still came. Her jaw tightened. I didn't come for you. Perhaps not. His gaze shifted briefly to the glowing path behind them. Then something changed in his expression, a sharp alertness. Unfortunately, he said quietly. You arrived at a dangerous time. Rowan groaned. Oh, great. Of course we did. The shadows around Irrendor suddenly lifted off the ground, swirling faster. Lila noticed immediately. What's happening? Before he could answer, a scream ripped through the night. It echoed from somewhere beyond the trees. Rowan jumped. Please tell me that's a normal forest sound. Another scream followed. Closer this time. Irrendor cursed under his breath. That should not be here. Lila frowned. What should... The trees exploded. Something burst through the forest edge. It was tall, too tall, nearly twice the height of a human. Its body was twisted like bark and bone fused together, with long clawed limbs dragging across the ground. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Lila. Rowan stared. Nope, the creature shrieked, and charged. Rowan grabbed Lila's arm. Run! They turned, but the monster moved faster. Its claws slashed through the air, barely missing Rowan's shoulder. Lila stumbled backward. The creature lunged again. Then darkness slammed into it. Not natural darkness. Eryndor's shadows exploded outward like a storm. They wrapped around the monster's limbs, yanking it sideways and smashing it into the ground. The clearing shook. The creature roared, thrashing violently. Rowan stared. Okay, that was actually impressive. Irrendor stepped forward, raising one hand. The shadows obeyed instantly, tightening around the creature like chains. Stay behind me, he ordered. Lila didn't argue this time. The monster screeched and snapped its jaws. What is that thing? Rowan shouted. Irrendor's voice was cold. A wraith, Lila swallowed. That doesn't sound good. It isn't. The wraith suddenly tore one arm free from the shadows. Its claws raked across Irrendor's chest. The cut was shallow, but black smoke burst from the wound instead of blood. Lila froze. What? Irrendor didn't react. He simply grabbed the creature's throat. The shadows surged again. With a deafening crack, the wraith collapsed into dust. Silence fell across the clearing. Rowan exhaled slowly. Well, he said, that was the worst camping trip I've ever been on. Irrendor stood very still. The shadows around him flickered wildly. Then his knees buckled. Lila stepped forward instinctively. Hey! He caught himself on one hand, breathing harder now. The smoke from his wound curled upward like living ink. Rowan frowned. Is he dying? No, Irrendor muttered. Unfortunately. But his voice sounded weaker. Lila stared at the strange wound. That thing hurt you? Yes, but you're a king with shadow powers or whatever. Yes. So why does it look like you're about to collapse? Irrendor slowly looked up at her. His eyes were darker now. The curse, he said. Lila frowned. What about it? The shadows around him twitched. When I use too much magic, he said quietly. It feeds the curse. Rowan blinked. That seems like a terrible design flaw. Lila ignored him. She noticed something else. The pendant around her neck was glowing brighter than ever. A pulse of silver light drifted toward Irrendor. The moment it touched him, the shadows recoiled. Irrendor inhaled sharply. His gaze snapped to her. Interesting. Lila grabbed the necklace. What just happened? Before he could answer, the path behind them vanished. The forest closed. Branches twisted back into place like a wall. Rowan slowly turned. Lila's stomach dropped. The way back. Irrendor stood up carefully now, studying the sealed trees. Yes, he said. That tends to happen. Rowan's voice rose an octave. What do you mean that tends to happen? Irrendor looked back at Lila. His expression had shifted again. Now it held something almost like curiosity. You cross the veil, he said. The forest only opens when it chooses. Lila felt dread creeping into her chest. You mean, yes. His voice was calm. You cannot leave. Rowan stared at him. Excuse me. You are now inside the Fey realm. Rowan pointed at the trees. No, we're not. We're going home. He tried pushing through the branches. The moment his hand touched them, a burst of blue magic threw him backward. He landed flat on the ground. I hate this forest. Lila turned slowly back to Irrendor. You trapped us here. I did not. Then fix it. I cannot. Her anger flared instantly. Then we have a problem. Irrendor tilted his head slightly. Yes, we do. Rowan groaned from the ground. I swear if this ends with a prophecy, I'm leaving. Eryndor's eyes glinted faintly. There is one. Rowan covered his face. Of course there is. The Fey King looked directly at Lila. According to the prophecy, he said calmly, the human girl who hates me most. The shadows curled slowly around his boots again. Is also the only one who can save me. Lila stared at him. Then she laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Good luck with that, because there was one thing she knew for certain. No matter what prophecy existed, she would never kiss the Fey King. Not in this lifetime. Not in any world. Rowan was still on the ground. I would like to file a complaint with the universe, he groaned. This trip was supposed to last 10 minutes. Lila barely heard him. She was staring at the forest wall where the path home had once been. Branches had twisted together so tightly they looked like solid wood. Pale blue magic pulsed through them like veins. She walked forward and touched one. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, a sharp jolt shot up her arm. Ow! She jerked her hand back. Eryndor watched her calmly. I did warn you. You said we couldn't leave, Lila snapped. You didn't say the forest would try to electrocute me. The veil between realms is not fond of being forced open. Rowan slowly sat up. I'm starting to think the veil and I have something in common. Lila turned back to Irrendor. So what now? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up toward the distant silver towers of the Fey Kingdom. Moonlight washed over the palace walls, making them glow like glass. My court will have felt the veil open, he said at last. That means they know I'm here? That means, he corrected, they know you are here. Lila crossed her arms. Why would they care about me? Eryndor's gaze flicked briefly to the pendant around her neck. Because the last time a human crossed the veil, he said quietly, my kingdom nearly fell apart. Rowan blinked. Awesome. Lila narrowed her eyes. You keep saying things like that without explaining anything. Yes, why? Because explanations take time. And we don't have time. Irrendor looked toward the forest behind them. Not if the Wraith you saw was only the first. Rowan stood up instantly. Let's go to the palace. Lila glared at him. You trust him now? I trust giant monster things even less. Irrendor turned and began walking toward the distant towers. The shadows at his feet curled forward like obedient animals. Rowan immediately followed. Lila didn't move. Irrendor stopped after a few steps and glanced back. You can stay here if you prefer. His tone was mild. But the next creature that finds you may not be so polite. Lila hesitated. Then she sighed in frustration and followed them. Just so we're clear, she said. I still hate you. Irrendor's mouth curved slightly. I am aware. The path toward the kingdom stretched across glowing fields. Lila had never seen anything like it. Silver grass shimmered beneath their feet. Strange flowers opened as they passed, their petals glowing faint purple. Above them, floating lights drifted lazily through the air. Rowan stared at everything. Okay, he whispered. This place is terrifying, but also kind of amazing. Don't get attached, Lila muttered. Eryndor walked ahead of them, silent and watchful. But something about him had changed. Lila noticed he was slower now. The wound the Wraith had given him still leaked faint trails of black smoke. She frowned. You're hurt. I noticed. Shouldn't you do something about it? The curse prevents normal healing. That seems inconvenient. Yes. Rowan leaned toward her. I kind of like him, he whispered. Lila elbowed him. Stop. The towers of the kingdom grew larger as they approached. Now Lila could see the details. The palace wasn't just silver. It was carved from pale crystal and moonstone, its walls etched with glowing symbols. Bridges of light connected tall spires that rose high into the night sky. It was breathtaking. Rowan exhaled slowly. I officially forgive the forest. Lila didn't respond. Her eyes had locked onto the massive gates ahead. 2 armored guards stood there. They weren't human. Their ears were long and pointed. Their armor shimmered like liquid metal, fey. The guards noticed them immediately. Both straightened and bowed. My king. Eryndor nodded once. Then one of the guards noticed Lila. His eyes widened. A human? The other guard stepped forward. Your Majesty, that is not possible. Eryndor's voice turned cold again. And yet she stands before you. The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Lila whispered to Rowan. I feel like we just broke a lot of rules, probably ancient ones. The gates slowly opened. Beyond them stretched a vast courtyard filled with glowing fountains and marble statues. But something felt wrong. Dozens of Fae were staring, whispering, watching her. Their expressions ranged from shock to open hostility. Lila leaned toward Irrendor. Your people seem friendly. They are surprised. That's one word for it. They reached the center of the courtyard. Suddenly a woman stepped forward. She moved with graceful precision, her long white hair flowing behind her like silk. Her eyes were a piercing shade of violet. Power radiated from her. She bowed slightly to Irrendor. My king. Irrendor's expression didn't change. Silvara. Her gaze shifted to Lila. The smile she gave was polite, too polite. And this must be the human. Lila didn't like her immediately. Something about the woman's eyes felt calculating. Silvara studied her necklace carefully. How fascinating, she murmured. Then she looked back at Irrendor. Is it true? Irrendor nodded once. She crossed the veil. A ripple of murmurs spread through the watching Fae. Silvara's smile widened slightly. Well, she said, this changes everything. Lila frowned. How exactly? Silvara turned toward her. Her voice was soft and pleasant. Because, dear human. Her violet eyes gleamed. You are standing in the middle of a prophecy that could destroy this entire kingdom. Rowan sighed. I knew it. Lila folded her arms. And I suppose I'm the hero? Silvara's smile sharpened. Oh no. Her gaze flicked briefly to Irrendor. You're the solution. The Fae King's shadows stirred uneasily. And also, Silvara added, the greatest danger we've had in centuries. Silence fell across the courtyard. Lila felt every pair of Fae eyes on her. Then she muttered under her breath, I should have stayed home. Irrendor glanced at her. For once, he said quietly, I agree. But something in his expression suggested he wasn't telling her everything. And deep down, Lila had the sudden uneasy feeling that entering the Fae Kingdom was only the beginning of her problems. Not the worst of them. The moment Lila stepped inside the palace, the air changed. It was warmer than outside, filled with the scent of night-blooming flowers and something faintly metallic, like magic hanging too thick in the air. The grand hall stretched endlessly before her. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with moving constellations. Light drifted through the room in glowing threads, weaving slowly like lazy fireflies. Rowan stared upward. Okay, he whispered. I'm officially impressed. Lila wasn't, because every Fae in the hall had stopped what they were doing, and every single one of them was staring at her. Not curiously, not politely, like she was a problem that had just walked through the front door. Silvara walked ahead with effortless grace, leading them deeper into the palace. The violet-eyed woman moved like she owned every inch of the place, which, Lila noticed, seemed to irritate Irrendor. My king, Silvara said sweetly over her shoulder, the court will want answers. They can wait. They have been waiting for 3 centuries. Irrendor's shadows shifted slightly along the marble floor. And they will continue waiting. Silvara stopped walking. Slowly she turned. 300 years, she said softly, and suddenly a human girl appears who can break your curse. Her violet eyes flicked to Lila. You must understand why everyone is concerned. Lila rolled her eyes. I'm concerned too. Silvara's smile widened faintly. How refreshing. Irrendor stepped between them before the conversation could go further. That is enough. Something in his tone made the nearby Fae instantly look away. Power pulsed in the air. Silvara bowed her head slightly. As you wish, my king. But when she straightened, Lila caught the brief flash of something in her expression. Not obedience, calculation. Then Silvara turned and disappeared down a side corridor. Rowan leaned closer to Lila. She's definitely evil, I noticed. Irrendor began walking again. Come. Lila followed reluctantly. Where are we going? To somewhere you won't accidentally destroy my kingdom. That sounds exaggerated. You opened the veil, he replied calmly. That alone nearly qualifies. Rowan whispered. He has a point. They walked through several twisting corridors lined with glowing tapestries. Some showed ancient battles, Others depicted strange creatures made of light and shadow. Eventually they reached a large set of doors. Eryndor pushed them open. The room inside looked like a library. Towering shelves filled with ancient books curved along circular walls. In the center stood a long wooden table covered in scrolls and glowing crystals. Rowan's eyes lit up. "Oh, this place is cool." Irrendor turned to Lila. "You will stay here." She frowned. That sounded less like a suggestion. It wasn't one. Lila crossed her arms. "You dragged me into your magical kingdom, and now you're putting me in detention. I did not drag you anywhere. You threatened us with monsters." They were already coming. Rowan slowly backed away toward a chair. "I'm going to sit over here while you two do whatever this is." Lila ignored him. Her gaze locked on Irrendor. "You still haven't explained the most important part. And what would that be? The curse." The word seemed to ripple through the room. The shadows around him stirred. Irrendor didn't speak for a moment. Then he stepped closer. "You are certain you wish to know?" "Yes. Most humans do not enjoy hearing how dangerous they are. I'll take my chances." His storm-grey eyes studied her. Then he said quietly, "My curse feeds on emotion." Lila blinked. "That sounds vague. Allow me to clarify." The shadows at his feet lifted slowly off the floor. They curled upward like smoke. "When I feel anger." The shadows thickened. The lights in the room dimmed. The SE grows stronger. The shadows suddenly lashed across the floor, cracking against the marble like whips. Rowan jumped. "Okay, that's terrifying," Irrendor continued. "When I feel grief, or fear, or hatred." The shadows climbed higher, wrapping around his arms. The curse spreads. Lila swallowed. "But what does that have to do with me?" Irrendor's gaze dropped briefly to her necklace, then back to her eyes. "You weaken it." The shadows flickered violently. Lila frowned. "How?" "The prophecy claims your magic is the opposite of the curse." "I don't have magic." "You opened the veil." "That necklace did." "Your parents made that necklace for you." Her heart skipped. "What?" Irrendor took another step closer. "Your parents were not ordinary humans, Lila." The way he said her name sent a strange chill down her spine. "They were scholars of ancient magic," he continued. "They came to this kingdom many years ago." Her chest tightened. "They died because of the Fae." "No." His voice was quiet but firm. "They died saving me." Silence filled the library. Rowan slowly looked up. "Wait, what?" Lila shook her head. "No. It is the truth. You're lying." His eyes darkened slightly. "I gain nothing from lying about their sacrifice." Her anger flared instantly. "You expect me to believe that? I expect nothing." The shadows around him pulsed again. "And yet here you stand." Suddenly the room shook. Books rattled on the shelves. Rowan stood up quickly. Is the castle supposed to do that?" The shadows around Irrendor exploded outward. They slammed into the walls, writhing like living creatures. Lila stepped back. "What's happening?" Irrendor's voice came out strained. "The curse." The shadows surged toward her, not attacking, pulling, drawn to her like gravity. The moment they touched the silver light around her pendant, they recoiled violently. Irrendor staggered. His hands slammed against the table. Rowan shouted, "Is he dying?" "I'm not dying," Irrendor snapped, but his voice was tight with pain. The shadows kept surging toward Lila, then snapping back, again and again, like the curse couldn't decide what to do with her. Lila's heart pounded. "What is it doing?" Irrendor lifted his head slowly. His expression was equal parts frustration and disbelief. "It's reacting to you." "How?" "Because," he said hoarsely, "the curse recognizes the one thing capable of breaking it." The shadows lashed across the floor again. This time they wrapped briefly around Lila's wrist. Cold lightning shot up her arm. She gasped. Then the shadows vanished completely. The room fell silent. Irrendor straightened slowly. His breathing was uneven, but his eyes were fixed on her with new intensity. "Interesting," he murmured. Lila rubbed her wrist. "That didn't feel interesting." Rowan pointed between them. "Okay, I think we're missing something important." Lila looked back at Irrendor. "You said a kiss breaks the curse." "Yes, And now your shadow monster magic keeps grabbing me. Yes, she narrowed her eyes. So, let me get this straight. His expression remained calm. You're the only human who can break my curse, he repeated. And the curse already recognizes you. Lila groaned. Fantastic. Irrendor's mouth curved slightly. For the record, he added, I did warn you. She glared at him. Don't get comfortable, Your Majesty. Oh, I still hate you. For a moment the tension between them thickened. Then Irrendor leaned closer, just enough that she could see the faint silver sparks in his eyes. Good, he said softly. Because hatred— His shadows stirred again along the floor, makes the curse far more entertaining. Rowan sighed loudly. I am trapped in a magical enemies-to-lovers situation, aren't I? Neither of them answered. But Lila had a terrible feeling he was absolutely right. By morning, the entire palace knew a human had entered the Fey realm, and according to the prophecy, she could break the king's curse, which meant half the kingdom suddenly wanted Lila gone, the other half wanted to study her like a dangerous animal, and Lila wanted coffee. Unfortunately, the Fey apparently did not believe in coffee. She sat at the long table in the library, staring at a cup of glowing blue liquid Rowan had enthusiastically accepted from a servant. He took a sip. His eyes widened. Oh, wow. What is it? I don't know, he said. But it tastes like lightning and blueberries. I'm not drinking that. Across the table, Irrendor watched them with mild amusement. You humans are very suspicious of free things. Only when they glow, Lila replied. Before he could respond, the massive doors of the library swung open. A tall Fey man strode in. His dark hair was tied loosely behind his head, and a thin scar ran across one cheek. Unlike the elegant court nobles Lila had seen earlier, his clothes looked practical. Dark leather armor, boots meant for fighting, and a sword hanging at his side. He stopped when he saw her. Then he burst out laughing. Well, he said, this is unexpected. Eryndor didn't look pleased. You're late, Kale. The man, Kale, shrugged. I heard rumors in the courtyard. His sharp green eyes shifted to Lila. I assumed they were exaggerating. He walked closer, studying her openly. Nope, he said. That's definitely a human. Rowan waved. Hi. Kale blinked. There are two? Lila crossed her arms. Yes. Try to contain your shock. Kyle grinned. I like her already. Irrendor leaned back in his chair. You're not here to socialize. Unfortunately. Kyle's expression grew more serious. The court has gathered. Lila groaned. That sounds like a problem. It is, Kyle confirmed. Most of them want you gone. Rowan pointed at himself. Do they want me gone too? Kyle shrugged. You're less important. Fantastic. Irrendor stood. The council can complain all they like. Kyle folded his arms. You know they won't just complain. I'm aware. 300 years of waiting for your curse to break. Kyle continued. And suddenly the prophecy appears. His gaze slid to Lila again. People are going to panic. Lila stood up. Let them. Irrendor looked at her. You underestimate how dangerous panic can be in a Fey court. Before she could reply, a voice echoed from the doorway. He's right. Everyone turned. Silvara stood there again, but she wasn't alone. Two more Fey stood beside her. The first was a tall woman with copper skin and blazing red hair braided down her back. Her armor was polished gold, and a spear rested casually against her shoulder. The second was stranger, a boy, maybe 17, with pale hair and bright silver eyes. He leaned lazily against the doorframe, twirling a dagger between his fingers. Silvara stepped forward. My king, she said smoothly. The council grows impatient. Eryndor's expression hardened. Then they will continue to grow impatient. Silvara gestured to the others. Allow me to introduce the voices of that impatience. She nodded to the warrior first. This is Commander Nyra, leader of the Royal Guard. Nyra gave Lila a long, assessing look. You're smaller than I expected. Lila frowned. That's a weird opening comment. Nyra shrugged. You're supposed to be powerful. I'm not. We'll see. Silvara then gestured toward the silver-eyed boy. And this is Prince Alar. Rowan blinked. Wait, Prince? Alar smiled lazily. second cousin to the king. He flipped the dagger into the air and caught it again. Also the court's favorite troublemaker. Lila immediately disliked him. His gaze lingered on her pendant. Well, Alar said softly, the prophecy girl finally arrives. Eryndor's voice cut through the room. Enough. The shadows around him crept across the floor. We are not holding court inside my library. Silvara clasped her hands together. But the court demands to see her. Lila rolled her eyes. I'm not a museum exhibit. Alar smirked. You kind of are. Kyle stepped closer to Irrendor. You can't hide her forever. Eryndor's jaw tightened. I don't intend to. Silence followed. Then he turned to Lila. Come with me, she blinked. To where? The throne room. Rowan choked on his glowing drink. Oh, this is going to go badly. The throne room was enormous, even bigger than the courtyard. A long silver hall stretched toward a raised platform where a massive throne carved from moonstone waited, and the room was full. Dozens of Fey nobles filled the chamber. The moment Lila entered, the whispers exploded. A human. It's true. She's the one. Some looked curious. Others looked furious. Rowan whispered, We should have stayed in the library. Eryndor walked straight down the center aisle. The crowd parted reluctantly. When he reached the throne, he turned to face the court. Lila stood beside him. Suddenly she felt very small. Silvara stepped forward. My king, she announced, her voice carrying through the chamber. The prophecy has arrived. A tall noble stepped out from the crowd. His silver robes shimmered with magic. And with it, he said coldly, comes disaster. Lila frowned. Rude. The noble pointed at her. Humans bring chaos. Rowan raised his hand. Technically accurate. Another noble spoke. The prophecy claims her kiss breaks the curse. And if it fails? The first noble's eyes flashed. Then the curse will consume the king completely. The room fell silent. Lila slowly turned to Eryndor. You didn't mention that part. He didn't look at her. Because it is only a possibility. A possibility, she said sharply. That's a pretty big detail, the noble continued. If the curse consumes him, his voice lowered, the entire kingdom could fall into shadow. Murmurs rippled through the court. Nyra's grip tightened on her spear. Kyle muttered under his breath. Well, that's not ideal. Lila stared at Irrendor. So if I try to break the curse, yes, and it goes wrong, yes, you could become some kind of shadow monster king. Alar chuckled softly. That would certainly spice things up. Lila glared at Irrendor. You really left that part out. Irrendor finally looked at her. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something darker. I didn't think you would agree to help anyway. She opened her mouth, but another voice interrupted. A cold voice. You're all arguing about the wrong problem. The crowd parted again. A tall Fey man stepped forward. Unlike the others, his clothes were black. His eyes were darker than Eryndor's shadows. Silvara's smile widened slightly. Ah, she said softly. Lord Varys, Kyle muttered under his breath. Oh, great. Lila glanced at him. You don't like that guy? No one does. Varys bowed slightly to the throne. My king. Eryndor's shadows curled sharply. State your point. Varys turned slowly toward Lila. His gaze was chilling. The prophecy is irrelevant, he said. The real question is much simpler. The room went silent. Then Varys said the words that made Lila's stomach drop. What if the human girl is not here to break the curse? His dark eyes gleamed, but to trigger it. The court erupted in chaos, and suddenly Lila realized something terrifying. Not everyone in this kingdom wanted the curse broken. Some of them might want it to win. Chaos followed Lord Varys's accusation. Voices exploded across the throne room. She could destroy the king. The prophecy is unclear. Send the human back. Kill her before she tries anything. Rowan leaned toward Lila. I'm starting to miss the forest monster. Lila didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on Irrendor, because he hadn't said a word. The shadows around the throne were shifting restlessly, like they were listening to every whisper in the room. Finally, Irrendor raised one hand. The room fell silent instantly. Enough! The word echoed through the chamber like thunder. Every Fae in the room lowered their heads, even Varys. Irrendor stood slowly from the throne. No one touches the human. His voice was calm, but the shadows across the floor darkened like storm clouds. She remains in the palace under my protection. A murmur spread through the nobles. Varys stepped forward again. My king, you are placing far too much faith in a human girl. Irrendor's eyes sharpened. I am placing faith in the prophecy. Silvara watched everything with quiet interest. Then she spoke softly. Perhaps the court is simply concerned about emotional influence. Lila frowned. What does that mean? Alar leaned casually against a pillar nearby. Oh, he said lazily. That means they think you might manipulate the king. Rowan snorted. She's been insulting him since we arrived. Nyra crossed her arms. That doesn't mean she won't try something else. Lila glared at all of them. First of all, I don't even want to be here. Varys smiled thinly. And yet here you are. Irrendor's patience finally snapped. I said enough. His shadows surged across the marble floor. The lights in the throne room flickered, and every noble instantly fell silent again. Irrendor looked at Lila. Come. He turned and walked out of the throne room without another word. Rowan hurried after them. Wow, he whispered. That meeting went great. The palace corridors felt colder now. Neither Lila nor Irrendor spoke for several minutes. Rowan eventually slowed his steps. I'm going to not be here for this part. Lila glanced at him. What part? The obvious argument you two are about to have. He turned down another hallway and disappeared. Lila stopped walking. Coward. Irrendor stopped a few steps ahead. Then he turned to face her. The silence between them felt heavier than before. Finally she said, You lied. His expression remained unreadable. I omitted certain details. You left out the part where breaking your curse could destroy your entire kingdom. That outcome is unlikely. But possible. Yes. Lila threw her hands up. Do you realize how insane that is? You were never required to help. That's not the point. Her voice echoed slightly through the corridor. You knew everyone in that room would blame me if something goes wrong. They will blame someone regardless. That's easy for you to say. It's your kingdom. Something flickered in his expression. Exactly. Lila frowned. What does that mean? Irrendor stepped closer. It means every decision I make risks thousands of lives. His voice lowered. I have lived with this curse for 3 centuries. Lila blinked. 300 years? Yes. Her anger faltered slightly. That's a long time. Yes. And suddenly the prophecy appears. His eyes held hers. So forgive me if I refuse to ignore it. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Lila looked away. You still should have told me everything. Yes, he admitted quietly. I should have. The honesty caught her off guard. Before she could respond, laughter echoed down the corridor. Slow clapping followed. Well, Alar's voice said lazily. That was entertaining. Lila groaned. He stepped out from behind a column, spinning his dagger again. You two argue like an old married couple. Irrendor's patience visibly vanished. Why are you here? To observe the prophecy. Alar's silver eyes flicked toward Lila. Also because the court is placing bets. Lila blinked. Excuse me? Oh yes, he said cheerfully. On whether you'll break the curse or kill the king. That's horrible. I bet on chaos. Irrendor rubbed his temples. Leave. Alar ignored him. Instead, he walked toward Lila. You know, he said thoughtfully, you're not what I expected. She narrowed her eyes. And what did you expect? Someone magical. His gaze dropped to her necklace. Someone powerful. He leaned slightly closer. But you just seem angry. Lila smirked. That's because I am. Alar grinned. I like that. Irrendor's shadow suddenly snapped across the floor. They wrapped briefly around Alar's ankle. The prince stumbled backward. Oh, Alar said. There's the jealousy. Lila blinked. Jealousy. Irrendor's voice turned dangerously quiet. Leave. Alar raised his hands in surrender. Relax, cousin. His eyes flicked between them with amusement. This is far more interesting than I expected. Then he disappeared down the corridor. Silence returned. Lila looked back at Irrendor. You're not jealous. His expression was perfectly calm. "I am the king. That's not an answer. I do not concern myself with court fools. Still not an answer." Eryndor sighed. "You misunderstand. Then explain. You assume I care who speaks to you." Lila frowned. "You don't?" "No." The bluntness stung more than she expected. Something in her chest tightened. "Good," she said quickly, "because I definitely don't care what you think. Excellent, great, wonderful." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Lila muttered, "You're unbelievably arrogant, and you are remarkably stubborn. I hate you, so you've mentioned—" She turned and started walking away, but Irrendor's voice stopped her. "Lila," she hesitated. "What?" For a moment he looked almost uncertain. Then he said quietly, "You should be careful around Delar." "Why?" "He enjoys chaos. So do you. That is different." "How?" Irrendor's gaze darkened slightly. "Because I know how dangerous it can become." Lila studied him for a moment. Then she shrugged. "Don't worry." His brow lifted slightly. "I hate Fey princes too." Irrendor watched her walk away, and for the first time since she arrived in the Fey kingdom, the curse stirred again, not from anger, not from hatred, but from something far more dangerous. Jealousy. The palace was quieter at night. Most of the court had retreated to their chambers, leaving the vast corridors lit only by floating silver lanterns. Their soft glow reflected across the polished floors like moonlight on water. Lila couldn't sleep, which wasn't surprising. She was trapped in a magical kingdom, surrounded by suspicious Fey nobles, and apparently responsible for a 300-year-old curse. Sleep seemed unrealistic, so she wandered. The corridors twisted endlessly, leading through open balconies and long archways carved with glowing runes. Outside, the night sky above the Fey realm shimmered with strange constellations she had never seen before. It was beautiful and unsettling. Lila stepped onto one of the palace balconies. Cold night air brushed against her skin, carrying the scent of distant flowers and rain. She leaned against the stone railing. "Can't sleep either." She jumped slightly. Eryndor stood in the shadows at the far end of the balcony. "Of course he did. You really need to stop appearing like that," she said. "You walked into my balcony." "Oh," she straightened awkwardly. "Well, I'll leave." "You don't have to." His voice was quieter tonight, less sharp. She hesitated, then leaned against the railing again. For a moment they just stood there in silence. The night wind stirred his pale gold hair. Lila hated how unfairly attractive he was. Finally she said, "So, yes, 300 years. Yes. That's how long you've been cursed. Yes." She studied his face in the soft moonlight. "You must be very tired." For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "You have no idea." The honesty in his voice surprised her. "Who cursed you?" she asked. "My brother." Lila blinked. "That's very dramatic. Fey politics often are." "What happened to him?" Eryndor's gaze shifted toward the distant mountains. "He died. From the curse?" "No." His voice turned colder. "From trying to control it." Lila shivered slightly. The wind had grown colder. Or maybe it was just the conversation. After a moment she said, "You could have told me the truth earlier." "Yes, but you didn't." "No. Why?" Eryndor looked at her again. "Because humans rarely stay once they understand the full danger." Lila scoffed. "You think I'd run?" "Yes. That's insulting. It's realistic." She rolled her eyes. "You clearly don't know humans. I have known many, not like me." That made him pause. "No," he admitted, "I have not." Silence settled between them again. Lila noticed something then. The faint black smoke still curling from the wound on his chest. "You're still hurt. It will pass." "That's what you said earlier, and it remains true." Lila frowned. "Show me." Eryndor raised an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon." "The wound. That seems unnecessary. Just show me." He studied her for a moment. Then slowly he loosened the clasp of the dark coat he wore. The fabric shifted aside. Lila inhaled sharply. The wound was worse than she thought. A jagged black mark spread across his skin like cracked ink, veins of shadow branching outward from the center. It looked wrong, like the darkness didn't belong there. "That's not normal." "No." The shadows around his feet stirred slightly. Lila reached toward the mark instinctively. "Wait," he said, but her fingers had already brushed his skin. The moment she touched him, the pendant around her neck flared with silver light. Eryndor inhaled sharply. The shadows across his chest recoiled like they had been burned. Lila froze. "Did I just hurt you?" "No." His voice sounded strained. "You did the opposite." The dark veins around the wound faded slightly. Lila blinked. "Wait." She touched his chest again. The silver light glowed brighter. The shadows shrank further. Eryndor's breathing slowed. Neither of them moved. Her hand was still pressed lightly against his skin. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Fey hearts beat slower than human ones, stronger, warmer. She suddenly realized how close they were standing. Very close. Eryndor's gaze dropped to her hand, then slowly lifted to her face. The air between them felt different now. He stepped closer without thinking. Lila didn't move away. His voice lowered slightly. "You weaken the curse. That's what you said. But I didn't realize how much." She swallowed. Maybe the prophecy isn't completely ridiculous. Perhaps. His hand lifted slowly, then hesitated near her wrist. "May I?" She nodded. His fingers gently closed around her hand. The moment their skin touched, the silver glow brightened again. The shadows at his feet recoiled farther across the balcony. Lila felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Irrendor seemed just as surprised. "Interesting," he murmured. "You say that a lot, because you continue to be interesting." She smirked slightly. "That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. Do not get used to it." They were standing very close now, close enough that she could see tiny sparks of silver magic in his eyes, close enough to notice how his voice had softened. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "What? Why do you really hate the Fae?" The question caught her off guard. "I told you. You blamed us for your parents' deaths." "Yes, but that is not the whole reason." She hesitated. He was too perceptive, too calm. Finally she admitted, "They chose this world over me." The words came out quieter than she expected. "They chased magic, prophecies, Fae politics." Her gaze dropped briefly, "And then they never came home." Eryndor didn't interrupt. "They loved this place," she finished, "and I hated it for taking them away." Silence followed. Then Irrendor said softly, "They spoke about you." Her head snapped up. "What? Your parents?" Her heart pounded. "You knew them?" "Yes." "What did they say?" His expression softened slightly. "They said you were stubborn." She snorted. "Accurate. They said you hated being told what to do." "Also accurate. And they said—" He paused. "What?" "They said you would change this kingdom someday." Lila stared at him. "That sounds like something parents say to make their kid feel important." "Perhaps, but they believed it." The wind shifted again. Neither of them moved away. Lila suddenly became very aware of the distance between their faces, or rather, the lack of distance. Eryndor noticed it too. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "You are very close to the solution to my curse right now." Her heart skipped. "You mean the kiss?" "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not subtle." "I have lived with this curse for 300 years. Fair point, but neither of them moved closer. Instead she smirked. "You still don't deserve it." His lips curved slightly. "Cruel, you'll survive." "I'm not certain of that." She stepped back then. The silver glow faded slightly. The shadows returned around his feet. Irrendor watched her carefully. "You still hate me?" She shrugged. Mostly. Don't get excited." His smile was faint. Too faint, but it was real. And for the first time since arriving in the Fae Kingdom, Lila wasn't entirely sure if she hated him anymore, which, unfortunately, might be even more dangerous. The next morning felt different. Lila noticed it the moment she stepped into the palace corridor. Servants bowed lower. Guards watched her more carefully, and whispers followed her everywhere. The court had clearly heard about the throne room argument, and the prophecy. Rowan appeared beside her, carrying another glowing drink. "Good morning, future destroyer of the kingdom." She groaned. "Please don't start." "Oh no, I'm serious," he said cheerfully. I heard two nobles arguing about whether your kiss will save the king or turn him into a shadow demon. That's comforting. Rowan sipped his drink. I'm choosing optimism. You always do. Yes, he said proudly, it keeps me alive. They entered the library again. Lila stopped immediately. Eryndor was already there. He stood near the tall windows, sunlight filtering through the glass behind him. The golden light caught in his hair and softened the sharp edges of his expression. He looked calmer, less like a storm waiting to happen, until he noticed her. Then the shadows at his feet stirred faintly. Rowan leaned toward her. Oh yeah, there's definitely tension. Go away, she muttered. Gladly. He walked straight to a nearby shelf and pretended to study a book very loudly. Lila crossed her arms. You're staring. Irrendor tilted his head slightly. I am observing. That's a fancy word for staring. And you are unusually defensive this morning. Maybe because everyone in the palace thinks I'm about to destroy your kingdom. That is not everyone. Most of them. He didn't argue with that. Instead, he said quietly, You left suddenly last night. Lila shrugged. You were about to start talking about kissing again, an important topic, not for me. But her voice came out a little too fast. Eryndor noticed. His eyes sharpened slightly. Interesting. What is? You are avoiding the subject. I'm not avoiding it. You are. I just don't want to kiss you. Rowan coughed loudly from across the room. Very normal conversation happening here. Lila ignored him. Eryndor stepped closer. Then why did you almost do it? Her breath caught. I didn't. You leaned in. I leaned closer to look at the wound. Yes. And then? She hesitated. Nothing. Exactly. The silence stretched. Lila hated how easily he unsettled her. She quickly changed the subject. You look better. The curse is calmer today. Because of last night? Most likely. His gaze dropped briefly to her necklace again, then back to her face. You should not keep healing me like that. She frowned. I didn't do anything. You touched me. That's not exactly a complicated medical procedure. His voice lowered slightly. It is when you are involved. Lila opened her mouth, then closed it again, because something in the way he said that felt different, more personal. Rowan leaned over from across the table. Just kiss already. Both of them turned to glare at him. Sorry, he said, continuing to mind my business. Irrendor looked back at Lila. Walk with me. That sounded like an order. It was a request. She considered refusing, but curiosity won. Fine. They left the library together. The palace gardens stretched behind the building like a glowing forest. Crystal trees arched overhead, their branches glittering with tiny lights that drifted slowly through the air. A narrow stone path wound through silver flowers and small reflecting pools. It was quiet here, peaceful. Lila walked beside him in silence for a while. Then she said, Why does everyone in your court hate humans so much? History. That's vague. There have been wars between Fae and humans. Yes, that explains the hostility. Some of it. They reached a small bridge crossing a narrow stream. Eryndor stopped there. Lila leaned against the railing. The water below shimmered faintly with magic. You're very calm today, she said. The curse fluctuates. And right now it is quiet. Because of me? He didn't answer immediately. Instead he said, Tell me something. What? Why did you touch me last night? The question caught her off guard. You were hurt. You don't like me. That doesn't mean I want you bleeding shadow smoke everywhere. Compassion from someone who hates me. Don't get used to it. He smiled faintly. You say that often, because you keep being insufferable. The wind stirred through the garden. Eryndor stepped closer to the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. You know something strange, he said quietly. What? I expected the human from the prophecy to be extraordinary. That's insulting. You are extraordinary. Her brow lifted. That sounded like a compliment. It was an observation, still counts. His eyes softened slightly, but not in the way I expected. How so? You are not powerful. Wow, you are not particularly magical, rude, but you are. He paused. What? Unpredictable. She laughed softly. That's because I'm human. That is exactly why. The silence returned again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It felt comfortable. Lila noticed the way the sunlight caught in his eyes, the faint silver sparks moving inside them. "Your eyes do that when the curse is weaker," she said. "What? The silver glow?" He blinked. "I was unaware." "Well, now you know." Their shoulders brushed slightly when she shifted. Neither of them moved away. Eryndor's voice dropped lower. "You're very close again. You're the one who walked over here. That is true." The air between them felt warm now, charged. Lila's heart beat a little faster. Irrendor noticed. "You're nervous." "I'm not." "You are. Maybe you're making me nervous. That would be understandable." She glanced at him. "You're enjoying this, a little. Why? Because you hate me, and yet you keep standing close enough to kiss me." Her breath caught again. "Maybe I just like annoying you. Perhaps." The wind shifted through the garden. Lila suddenly realized something. Neither of them had moved away, not even a little. Eryndor's voice softened. "You could break the curse right now." She met his gaze. "Maybe, and yet you won't know. Why?" She smirked. "Because you're still arrogant." His lips curved slightly. "Fair." She pushed away from the railing then. "Don't get comfortable, Your Majesty." "I wouldn't dream of it." She started walking back toward the palace, but after a few steps she glanced back. Eryndor was still standing on the bridge, watching her. And for the first time since they met, there was something unmistakably warm in his expression, which meant the slow burn between them had officially begun, and neither of them seemed ready to stop it. By nightfall, the palace felt different again, not tense like the throne room, not quiet like the garden. Something darker had settled over it, like the kingdom itself was holding its breath. Lila felt it the moment she stepped into the great hall for dinner. Long tables stretched across the room, filled with glittering plates and strange glowing foods. Fey nobles sat in elegant clusters, their conversations low and careful. But every time Lila walked past, the whispers returned. Rowan leaned toward her. "I think someone just called you the curse bringer. That's flattering." Someone else said King Stealer. She stopped walking. "What?" Rowan shrugged. "I think they mean you might marry him." Lila choked. "I am absolutely not marrying the Fey King." Across the hall, Eryndor sat at the high table, speaking quietly with Kyle and Commander Nyra. He looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and just like that, the noise around her faded. Lila quickly looked away. Rowan noticed. "Oh yeah," he whispered. "There's definitely tension. Stop saying that. Never." A loud voice interrupted them. "Well, well." Lila turned. Prince Alar strolled toward them with that same lazy grin. "You survived the court meeting," he said. "Barely," Lila replied. Alar studied her face carefully. "You look less angry today. I'm always angry." "True." He leaned against the table beside her. "But you're also glowing." Rowan blinked. "She's glowing?" "Magic glow," Alar clarified. His silver eyes flicked toward Irrendor, which usually means the king has been close. Lila felt heat rise to her face. "That's none of your business." Alar grinned wider. "Oh, I think it is." Before she could respond, a servant suddenly stumbled near their table. The tray he carried tipped sharply. A goblet crashed to the floor. Dark liquid spilled across the marble. The servant dropped to his knees instantly. "I'm sorry, my lady." Lila bent down instinctively to help him pick up the shattered pieces. "Don't worry about it." Then something flashed. Steel. The servant's hand moved far too fast. A hidden dagger shot upward, straight toward her throat. Rowan shouted, "Lila!" But someone else moved faster. A shadow slammed into the servant like a thunderbolt. The man flew across the hall and crashed into a pillar. The entire room erupted in chaos. Eryndor stood at the far end of the hall. His shadows exploded across the floor like a living storm. The lights flickered violently. The nobles backed away instantly. Lila was still frozen beside the table. Her heart hammered in her chest. The servant struggled weakly on the floor. But before anyone else could react, Eryndor appeared beside him. Not walked, appeared. His shadows had dragged him across the hall in seconds. He grabbed the assassin by the collar and lifted him off the ground. The room went silent. Eryndor's voice was deadly quiet. "You tried to kill her." The servant trembled. "My king." The shadows tightened around his body like chains. "Who sent you?" The man shook his head frantically. I... The shadows began to crush him. "Who sent you?" the assassin screamed, but before he could answer, a black dart shot from somewhere in the crowd. It struck the man's neck. His body went limp instantly. Dead. Gasps spread through the hall. Kyle swore under his breath. Poison. Eryndor slowly lowered the body. The shadows around him darkened further. The air in the room felt heavier now. Dangerous. Nyra stepped forward. "Guards, seal the hall." Armored Fae rushed to the doors. No one was leaving, but Lila barely noticed, because Irrendor had turned toward her, and his expression was terrifying. The shadows surged toward her, then stopped, right at her feet. His voice came out low and furious. "Did he touch you?" Lila blinked. "No." The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, but the anger remained. Alar watched the scene carefully from across the room. "Well," he murmured, "that's new." Rowan stepped beside Lila. "I'm okay," she said quickly, but Irrendor was already walking toward her. Every step made the shadows crack across the floor. The entire hall watched. When he reached her, he looked her over carefully. "Are you hurt?" "No." "You're certain?" "Yes." For a moment he didn't move. Then his hand lifted instinctively. His fingers brushed lightly against her wrist. The pendant around her neck glowed faintly again. The shadows around him recoiled slightly, but his anger didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened. He turned slowly toward the crowd. His voice echoed through the hall. "Hear this clearly." The shadows rose behind him like wings. "Anyone who raises a weapon against the human," the floor beneath them cracked slightly from the magic, "raises a weapon against their king." Silence fell over the court. Then he finished quietly. "And anyone who touches her." His silver eyes darkened. "Dies." A shiver ran through the entire room. Even the nobles who hated her looked uneasy now. Lila stared at him. Her heart was still racing. That was dramatic. Eryndor looked back at her. "Yes, you didn't have to threaten everyone. They needed to hear it." "Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because someone just tried to murder you, and, he said quietly, "I do not tolerate threats to what is under my protection." Her brow lifted slightly. "Your protection?" "Yes." She studied his expression, then smirked faintly. That sounded suspiciously like jealousy again. For a moment he didn't answer. Then his voice lowered slightly. "Perhaps it was—" Rowan whispered loudly beside her. "Oh, wow." But Lila barely heard him, because Eryndor's hand was still loosely holding her wrist, and for some reason, neither of them seemed eager to let go. The great hall slowly emptied after the assassination attempt. Guards dragged the dead assassin away. Nobles whispered in frightened clusters before retreating to their chambers. Even the most arrogant members of the court had gone quiet after hearing the king's threat. Anyone who touches her dies. Lila was still trying to process that. Rowan leaned toward her. "Well," he whispered, "that was the most romantic death threat I've ever witnessed." "That was not romantic." "Sure it wasn't." Before she could respond, Kyle approached them. "The king wants to see you." Rowan raised a finger. "Just her?" "Yes." He sighed dramatically. "I hate being excluded from important plot moments." Lila shot him a look. "Go to bed." "Fine," he said. "But if you two start kissing without me here to witness it, I will feel deeply betrayed." She shoved him toward the corridor. "Go." Rowan disappeared with a grin. Irrendor was waiting in the palace gardens, the same bridge from earlier that day. The night sky above the Fey realm shimmered with pale stars, and the crystal trees glowed softly in the darkness. He stood near the railing, shadows moving slowly around his feet like restless smoke. When Lila approached, he didn't turn immediately. "You should not have been alone tonight." She folded her arms. "I wasn't alone. You were vulnerable. I handled it." "Yes," he said quietly. "You nearly got your throat cut. Lila walked onto the bridge. And you nearly crushed a man to death in front of the entire court. He tried to kill you. That doesn't mean you had to. She stopped, because Irrendor had finally turned to face her, and there was still anger in his eyes, not the cold, distant kind, something sharper, more personal. You think I overreacted, he said. I think you terrified everyone. That was the point. She sighed. You can't solve every problem with threats. Some problems require them. The silence between them stretched. The wind moved softly through the glowing trees. Finally, Lila said, You were jealous. Irrendor blinked. I was not. You were. I was protecting you. From a servant with a knife. From anyone who thinks they can harm you. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously emotional for someone who doesn't care who talks to me. His jaw tightened. That was different. How? He stepped closer, close enough that the silver light from the pendant around her neck brushed faintly against his shadows. They tried to kill you, he said quietly. And that bothers you? Yes. Why? The question hung between them. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said softly, Because the prophecy cannot break my curse if you're dead. Lila rolled her eyes. You're impossible. And yet you're still here. Yes, she admitted. I am. They stood there in silence again. The tension between them felt thicker tonight, stronger. Lila noticed the faint shadow marks still across his chest beneath his shirt. Did the wound get worse? She asked. No. Can I see it? His brow lifted slightly. You seem very interested in touching me. Only medically. That is disappointing. Stop being dramatic. But he loosened the clasp of his coat again. The dark mark across his chest had faded slightly, but the veins of shadow still curled faintly across his skin. Lila stepped closer to look, closer than she probably should have. Hold still, she murmured. Her fingers brushed lightly against the mark. The pendant glowed instantly. Silver light spread across his skin. Eryndor inhaled sharply. The shadows recoiled again. Lila felt the warmth of his skin beneath her hand. His heartbeat, slow, strong. She realized suddenly how close she was standing. Very close. Her hand was still pressed lightly against his chest. Eryndor's voice lowered. You're doing that again. What? Standing close enough to kiss me. Her breath caught. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? The silver glow from her pendant illuminated both of them now. His eyes looked brighter in the light. She swallowed. You're imagining things. Perhaps. But he didn't move away. Instead, his hand lifted slowly. His fingers brushed gently against her wrist. The magic between them flared again. Warm. Alive. Lila's heart beat faster. You feel that, he murmured. Yes. The curse reacts to you. Maybe. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. You could end it. Maybe. And yet you won't. Not yet. Why? She smiled slightly. Because you still annoy me. His lips curved faintly. That seems like a poor reason. Maybe I like watching you suffer. You are cruel, and you're arrogant. The distance between them had disappeared completely now. Irrendor's hand slowly slid from her wrist to her fingers. He held them lightly, testing, waiting for her to pull away. She didn't. The silence grew warmer, more dangerous. You still hate me, he said quietly. Mostly. Don't get excited. His voice dropped lower. I am not excited. Liar. That made him laugh softly, and before either of them could think better of it, Lila leaned forward. The kiss started slowly, tentative, like both of them were testing whether it was real. Irrendor froze for half a second in surprise. Then his hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer. The magic between them exploded. The pendant blazed silver. His shadows surged wildly around the bridge, but neither of them pulled away. The kiss deepened, warmer, hungrier, 300 years of restraint breaking all at once. Lila grabbed the front of his coat, pulling him closer as his other hand slid gently into her hair. The curse reacted violently. Shadows lashed across the ground. Silver light burned through them. Magic clashed in sparks around the bridge. But the kiss only grew more intense. Until finally, Irrendor pulled back slightly. Both of them were breathing harder. His forehead rested lightly against hers. For a moment neither of them spoke, Then he whispered, "Interesting." Lila laughed softly. "You say that too much." His eyes were brighter now, the silver glow stronger than before. "The curse weakened," he said quietly. "How much?" "More than it has in centuries." She smirked. "Guess I'm good at this." He studied her face carefully, then said softly, "That was only one kiss." Her heart skipped. "Yes, we may require more." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you flirting with me, Your Majesty?" His lips curved slightly. "Perhaps, and for the first time since the prophecy began." The curse didn't feel like the most dangerous thing between them anymore. The moment their kiss ended, the world changed. Not slowly, not subtly, violently. A blast of silver light burst from Lila's pendant, racing across the bridge like lightning. At the same time, Eryndor's shadows surged upward in a towering wave of darkness. Magic collided. The entire garden trembled. Crystal branches rattled. The water beneath the bridge erupted into glowing ripples. Lila stumbled back. "What?" Eryndor caught her before she could fall. His arm wrapped firmly around her waist, pulling her against him as the shadows spun wildly around them. "The curse is reacting," he said. That didn't sound calm. "It isn't." Another pulse of magic exploded outward. The silver glow from her pendant clashed with the darkness curling across his chest. The mark of the curse burned brighter now, like cracked black lightning spreading across his skin. Lila's stomach dropped. "That looks worse." "It's fighting." "What is?" "The curse," before she could respond. A loud alarm horn echoed from the palace. Once, twice, 3 times. Eryndor's head snapped toward the castle. That shouldn't be happening. Footsteps pounded across the garden path. Kyle appeared first, sword already drawn. "Your Majesty!" Nyra followed seconds later with a group of armored guards. "The northern gates have been breached," she said. Eryndor frowned. "By who?" Kyle's expression darkened. "Varys." Lila felt the word land like ice in her chest. "That creepy noble guy?" "Yes," Kyle said grimly, "and he brought half the court with him." Irrendor's shadows darkened immediately. "Of course he did." Nyra tightened her grip on her spear. "They're moving toward the throne room." "Then we end this now," Irrendor said. Lila grabbed his arm. "Wait." He looked down at her. "The curse just reacted to the kiss," she said. "Maybe that's part of what he wants." Eryndor's expression hardened. "You think Varys planned the assassination and this attack?" "Yes." Kyle nodded slowly. "That actually makes sense." Nyra frowned. "If the prophecy breaks the curse, Varys loses his chance at the throne." Lila blinked. "Wait, he wants the throne?" Kyle snorted. "Most nobles here do." Eryndor's shadows crawled across the ground. "But Varys prefers chaos." Lila suddenly understood. "If the curse consumes you, he becomes the most powerful Fae in the kingdom," Eryndor finished. The realization settled heavily between them. Rowan suddenly ran into the garden, breathless. "I heard horns. Is this the part where the kingdom collapses?" Kyle nodded. "Pretty much." Rowan groaned. "Fantastic." Eryndor stepped away from the bridge. His shadows gathered behind him like a storm waiting to break. "Kyle." "Nyra, prepare the guard." They both nodded immediately. The soldiers rushed back toward the palace. Rowan looked at Lila. "So, should we run?" She shook her head. "No." Irrendor glanced back at her. "You should stay here. Not happening. This is not your fight." "Yes, it is." "Lila, you said the prophecy involves me," she interrupted. "You said I weaken the curse." "Yes, then I'm coming." Irrendor studied her for a moment, then sighed quietly. "You are unbelievably stubborn. You noticed." Rowan raised his hand. "I'm also coming." Lila blinked. "You hate danger." "Yes," he said. "But if a shadow monster king appears, I want to see it happen." Eryndor almost smiled. The throne room looked very different now. Torches blazed along the walls. Guards formed defensive lines across the marble floor, and at the far end of the chamber, Lord Varys stood beside the throne. His black robes moved like liquid darkness around him. Several nobles stood behind him. Traitors. Varys smiled when Eryndor entered. "My king." His gaze slid to Lila, and the human. Eryndor's shadows crept across the floor. You betrayed the court. I improved it. Varys stepped down from the throne platform. For 3 centuries you have ruled while cursed, weak, incomplete. His dark eyes gleamed. And now the prophecy arrives. Yes, Eryndor said coldly, and I intend to finish it. Varys laughed softly. Oh no. He raised one hand. Dark magic erupted around him. You intend to trigger it. The shadows around Irrendor surged violently. Lila grabbed his arm. What does he mean? Varys's smile widened. The curse does not break easily. His voice echoed through the chamber. To destroy it. The darkness around Eryndor's chest flared. It must first consume the king completely. Lila's heart dropped. You're lying. Am I? Eryndor's breathing grew heavier. The shadows across his body were spreading. The curse was reacting again, stronger this time. Varys laughed. Yes, that's it. The dark veins spread across Eryndor's chest like wildfire. The room trembled. Rowan whispered, Okay, this looks very bad. Lila turned to Irrendor. His eyes were darker now, the silver glow fading beneath the rising shadows. You didn't tell me that part, she said quietly. His voice was strained. Because I wasn't sure. Sure about what? That I could survive it. The shadows surged upward again. Lila's heart pounded. So the kiss wasn't enough. No, Varys smiled, but the next one might be. Everyone froze. Lila stared at him. What? Varys's voice dropped to a whisper. The final kiss must happen when the curse is at its strongest. Eryndor staggered slightly. The shadows lashed across the floor like wild beasts. And if it fails, Varys said softly, the king becomes the very monster he fears. Silence filled the throne room. Lila looked at Irrendor, at the darkness crawling across his skin, at the man who had protected her, argued with her, kissed her. And suddenly she understood something terrifying. Breaking the curse might save him, but it might also destroy everything, including him, including the kingdom. And she was the only one who could decide. Eryndor's voice came out rough. Lila, leave, she shook her head slowly. No. The shadows surged higher. Varys laughed quietly. Yes, he whispered. Let's see if love is stronger than a curse. The throne room trembled under the weight of the curse. Shadows spread across the marble floor like living cracks, creeping outward from Eryndor's feet. The torches along the walls flickered violently as dark magic pulsed through the air. Lila had never felt power like this before. It was heavy, ancient, and furious. Irrendor stood at the center of it all, barely holding himself upright. The black veins of the curse had spread across his chest and neck now, glowing faintly like burning ink beneath his skin. His eyes flickered between silver and pure shadow. Lila, he said hoarsely, go. She didn't move. Varys watched from the throne platform, clearly delighted. Yes, the traitorous lord murmured. Run, little human. Lila ignored him. Instead, she stepped closer to Irrendor. The shadows lashed toward her instantly, but the moment they touched the silver glow from her pendant, they recoiled violently. The clash of magic filled the room with sparks of silver and black. Irrendor groaned. Stop! I can't! You have to! No! Rowan shouted from the doorway. This is a terrible idea. Kyle grabbed him by the shoulder. Let her do it. Commander Nyra stood nearby with her spear ready, her eyes locked on Varys. If the king falls, she muttered, we kill that traitor immediately. Varys only smiled wider. Too late. Another pulse of darkness exploded from Eryndor's body. The throne room cracked, glass shattered from the high windows. The curse was consuming him. Irrendor dropped to one knee. His shadows exploded outward like a storm. Lila! She reached him before he could finish the warning. Her hands grabbed his shoulders. The silver light from her pendant flared brighter than ever before. For a moment the shadows froze. The room held its breath. Irrendor looked up at her. His voice was barely steady now. You don't understand. Then explain. If this fails. The darkness around him surged again. I won't be able to stop it. Lila swallowed. You mean the curse? Yes. And if I become that monster? His voice dropped to a whisper. You must run. Her chest tightened. You're asking the wrong girl. His brow furrowed slightly. What? I'm not leaving. You should know. Varys laughed loudly from the throne. "Oh, this is perfect." He raised his hand, dark magic swirling around his fingers. "The curse is almost complete." The shadows around Irrendor rose like a towering wave. His breathing grew rougher. His eyes darkened further. "Lila," she leaned closer. "I know, this could kill you. I know, you barely know me." She smiled softly. "Unfortunately, I know you just enough." His expression faltered. For the first time since the curse began rising, fear crossed his face. Not fear of the darkness, fear for her. "You still hate me," he said quietly. She laughed softly. "Not anymore." The words stunned him. Varys scoffed. "Oh, please." But Lila ignored him. She lifted her hand to Irrendor's face, brushing away a strand of golden hair that had fallen across his eyes. "You're still arrogant," she said. "Yes, you're still infuriating. I've heard. And you still owe me about 300 explanations." "That sounds accurate." She smiled faintly. "But I think I might like you anyway." The shadows surged again. The curse was reaching its peak. Varys stepped forward eagerly. "Yes, yes, now." Eryndor grabbed her wrist suddenly. His grip wasn't cruel, just desperate. "If this goes wrong," she leaned down slightly, "then we'll deal with it. You're unbelievably reckless. Maybe," then she whispered softly, "but you kissed me first." His breath caught. Before he could argue, Lila pulled him closer and kissed him. The magic exploded instantly. Silver light burst from her pendant like a star being born. The darkness of the curse surged upward to meet it. The throne room vanished in a storm of light and shadow. The kiss deepened instinctively, both of them clinging to each other as centuries of magic collided. Eryndor's shadows screamed against the silver glow. The curse fought, hard, but something else pushed back. Something warmer, stronger, something the curse hadn't expected. Irrendor felt it first, the warmth of her hands, the steady heartbeat against his chest, the stubborn refusal to let go. Love. The curse cracked, literally. A jagged fracture of silver light tore across the dark veins on his chest. Varys' smile vanished instantly. "No." Another crack split the darkness. Silver light surged through Irrendor's body. The shadows screamed as the curse shattered. One final burst of magic exploded across the throne room. And then, silence. The darkness vanished. The silver light faded slowly. Lila pulled back slightly, breathing hard. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Irrendor looked down at his chest. The black veins were gone, the curse was gone. Varys staggered backward. "That's impossible." Kyle grinned. "Oh, I love it when traitors say that." Nyra stepped forward with her spear. "Your coup is over." Guards rushed into the chamber. Varys tried to raise his magic, but without the curse feeding him power, it failed. The guards dragged him to the floor. Rowan ran into the room. "Did it work?" Irrendor slowly stood. For the first time in 300 years. The shadows did not follow him. He looked at his hands. Then at Lila. His voice came out softer than she had ever heard it. "Yes." The room slowly filled with stunned silence. The curse had finally been broken, and the Fey King was free. The Fey Kingdom of Liora had never seen a celebration like this. For 3 days and 3 nights, the palace glowed with light. Crystal lanterns floated through the sky like tiny moons. Music drifted through every courtyard, and the once tense halls of the castle were filled with laughter instead of whispers. The curse was gone. The shadow that had hung over the kingdom for 3 centuries had vanished in a single burst of silver light, and at the center of it all stood the 2 people who had made it happen, Lila Maren and King Eryndor. Lila stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the gardens where everything had begun. It felt strange now. The bridge where they had first kissed shimmered softly in the distance, surrounded by glowing flowers and quiet streams. 3 months had passed since the night the curse broke. 3 months since the throne room nearly collapsed. 3 months since she had kissed a Fey king and changed an entire kingdom. Rowan leaned against the railing beside her, eating something that looked suspiciously like glowing cake. "You know," he said, "this whole thing turned out better than I expected." Lila raised an eyebrow. "You expected worse?" "I expected death. Chaos. Possibly a dragon. That's oddly specific." Rowan shrugged. "Fantasy rules. From across the garden, Kyle called up to them. "You're both late." Nyra stood beside him, arms crossed, trying and failing not to smile. The entire court had gathered in the garden. Even the nobles who once hated her now looked accepting. Well, most. Lila sighed. "Are we really doing this?" Rowan grinned. "Oh yes, we are absolutely doing this." Before she could reply, footsteps sounded behind her. Lila turned. Irrendor stood in the doorway. He looked different now, not physically. His golden hair still caught the sunlight the same way, and his storm-grey eyes still held that dangerous spark. But the shadows were gone, completely. For the first time in 300 years, the king stood without darkness trailing behind him. And somehow, he looked lighter. "Everyone is waiting," he said. Lila crossed her arms. "You planned this. Perhaps you told the entire court. Yes, you're enjoying this, immensely." She groaned. "You're impossible. And yet," he said softly, stepping closer, "you're still here." She studied him for a moment. "You know I was supposed to go home. Yes, to the human world. Yes. And instead, I stayed in your magical kingdom. Yes." He tilted his head slightly. "That sounds like a decision." She rolled her eyes. "Don't get smug about it. Too late." Rowan clapped loudly behind them. "Kiss already. The audience is waiting." Lila shoved him toward the stairs. "Go away." He disappeared laughing. Eryndor offered her his hand. "Well?" She looked at it, then at him. "You're really asking me to marry you in front of the entire kingdom?" "Yes, you're very confident. I waited 300 years for my curse to break." He stepped closer. "I'm not waiting longer than necessary for the rest of my life." Her heart skipped. "You're dramatic. You love it." She hesitated for 1 second. Then she took his hand. The wedding took place beneath the crystal trees in the palace garden. Fey magic lit the sky like falling stars. Kyle stood proudly beside the king. Nyra tried very hard not to cry. Rowan cried anyway. And when Lila walked down the glowing garden path, wearing silver threads woven with tiny stars, the entire kingdom watched. Irrendor looked at her like he still couldn't believe she was real. When she reached him, he whispered quietly, "You could still change your mind." "After all this?" "Yes." She smirked. "Not a chance." The ceremony was simple. The kiss was not. And the Fey Kingdom celebrated long into the night. Years passed. The palace grew louder, not with court politics or dark magic, but with children. 2 of them. A little girl with silver-grey eyes like her father and a stubborn streak exactly like her mother, and a younger boy whose laughter echoed through the halls and whose magic sparkled with both shadow and light. Rowan remained their favorite uncle. Kyle became the children's favorite sparring partner. Nyra terrified every noble who complained about the noise. And Eryndor ruled a kingdom that was finally free. One evening, many years later, Lila stood once again on the palace balcony. Their daughter ran through the garden below, chasing glowing lights. Their son followed with a wooden sword. Eryndor stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You were right," he said quietly. "About what?" "This kingdom needed you," she smiled. "And you needed me." "Yes." He kissed her softly. Then their daughter shouted from below, "Mother! Father! Look!" Both of them turned toward the garden. The girl stood near the old bridge. Her small hands held something glowing, a necklace, silver, covered in ancient runes. Lila's heart stopped, because she recognized it instantly, her old pendant, the one that had broken the curse. But something was wrong. The runes were changing. Dark cracks spread across the silver surface. A faint shadow leaked from the symbols. Eryndor's expression darkened. "That shouldn't be possible." Their daughter looked up at them. "Father." The wind suddenly went cold, and somewhere deep beneath the palace, something ancient stirred, not a curse, something older, something that had been waiting. And for the first time in years, the shadows returned. The end. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.